Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to wyomingpbs.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
When you think of airplane manufacturing, Afton, Wyoming may not come to mind. Yet airplanes have been manufactured here since 1939. Today, Aviat Aircraft makes the Husky and the Pitts Special. Aviat Aircraft, next on Wyoming Chronicle.
Funding for this program was provided by the members of the Wyoming PBS Foundation. Thank you for your support.
And I'm Craig Blumenshine with Wyoming PBS, and it's our pleasure to be in Afton, Wyoming at Aviat Aircraft with Steve Anderson, the acting president of the company.
Thanks for coming.
Steve, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us on Wyoming Chronicle.
Absolutely.
As we said in our open, I think people would be very surprised that airplanes are being made and have been made for a long, long time, right here in Afton. Let's start with the history of Aviat Air, if we could, and then we'll work forward from there.
Sure. So the main floor of the factory was poured in 1939. The company was founded by two brothers, the Call brothers, who came to Afton and fell in love with it and liked airplanes, and so built a factory to build airplanes.
And this is the longest continually operating single-engine aircraft manufacturing company in the country.
That's right.
And that includes companies like Piper, Cessna, and others.
That's correct, yeah. So during the 80s, when a lot of those companies shut down due to liability issues and things like that, we continued to produce airplanes.
So tell me, take us way back. What were the first types of planes produced here?
So the first thing that they really did here was support the war effort in World War II. So there were a lot of training bases around the area, and when cadets happened to bang an airplane up, they would bring them over and they would fix them here. Then shortly after the war, once materials were more available and not being used for the war, they started to build the Call Air, which was an interesting airplane, a low wing strut braced, kind of a different looking airplane. And we'll get you some pictures of it so you can see it.
Oh, we'd sure love to see that. The main planes that are built now, there are two, and they couldn't be more different.
Right.
The Pitts Special,
right.
Stunt airplane,
right.
And the Husky, a big, strong, slow plane.
Right. Right.
How did those come about?
So the Pitts was the brainchild of Curtis Pitts, who's pretty famous in the industry. Curtis was building a single-seat Pitts way back in the 50s. And he had come up with a two-seat airplane that he was looking for a place to manufacture. They had started manufacturing them in Homestead, Florida. And then he found out about this company, and they were able to strike a deal and move production of the Pitts up here in the early 70s. So that airplane's been produced continually here since the 70s. Since. Yeah.
So before we talk about the Husky, who buys a Pitts? What's the market for somebody that wants to do this?
A lot of guys are wanting to compete in aerobatics. There's a lot of contests across the country. And so people will buy a Pitts, both men and women, to compete in aerobatic competitions up through the intermediate level. So that's kind of the person who, a lot of people have maybe another airplane as well that they travel in, but they want to compete in the aerobatic circuit.
Steve, we met you earlier this summer,
right?
And you were actually a test pilot for the company then, and things have changed a little bit since.
Right.
And we saw you screaming right at us, at 240 miles an hour on a runway.
Sure.
And this thing is a powerful, agile plane.
It is. It's a 1,700-pound gross weight airplane with a 260 horsepower engine. So it's lightweight with a lot of power.
So give me a sense of what it is like to fly the thing, if you can describe it.
Boy, how do you describe it? I don't know that I can describe it. It's something you kind of have to experience for yourself. Absolute freedom in the air. and it's just a pleasure to fly. It's an airplane that when you think to turn, the airplane kind of already starts to turn. So
In the industry, is it one of the most agile planes there is? Is it?
it's very, very agile. There's there's some other aerobatic airplanes out there, but it keeps right up there.
So does the design continue to improve a little bit? Do you continue to research and change a little bit to adapt to new market wants?
We do. We do. So, and that goes for the Husky and the Pitts as well. We're continually trying to improve the designs, add new things, new avionics, new features to the airplane to stay competitive.
So then we go to the Husky, and we're in a shop, and I think I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Huskies that are right here. This is what I think one of your maintenance areas.
Yep, this is our factory service department.
And this plane to me might have many, many, many uses.
Yeah.
Give us an idea for the market for this plane.
So for the Husky, anything from a guy who wants to go into the backcountry and go camping with, maybe his wife or his friend, to Africa, where they're being used in anti-poaching efforts in Tanzania and Zimbabwe and Zambia and South Africa, Kenya. So they're all over the continent, being used for all different kinds of reasons.
Give us its history. When was it started to produce?
So the Husky was a clean sheet design in 1986. Frank Christian, he wanted to basically take all the stuff that guys didn't like about the old Super Cub and build a new airplane kind of around that idea. So when they did that, they updated the airplane to the newest regulations, which are Part 23. So the engineering standards were a lot more strict than the old Car 3 requirements that the Super Cub was certified under. The idea being that the airplane is going to be much safer. The old certification requirements didn't really care about the crashworthiness of an airplane or that the occupants were going to be okay if something was to happen. So that was a big thing for the airplane. And that's kind of what gave it this robust design. And then they got rid of some of the other things they didn't like about the Super Cub. The trim system, fixed pitch propeller. We went to a constant speed propeller, which gives you a lot more cruise speed. So it's a much faster airplane. It's much more comfortable. And it has the newest avionics in it. So believe it or not, you can fly this little airplane under instrument conditions.
I'm not sure whether our viewers can hear, but it's raining outside.
Yeah.
Which
we're just happy it's not snowing.
that is true, but it does snow here.
It does a lot.
And so that's what I want to talk about. I mean, Afton to me is such a beautiful place, but you get all 4 seasons with great weather days. You get rain, you get wind, and you get a lot of snow in the wintertime.
We do.
How does that impact what happens here?
We just work around it. It doesn't impact us at all. People are surprised sometimes, but we continue to fly airplanes and operate through the entire year. So it gets a little more challenging. Pushing airplanes around outside. Sometimes guys will fall down on the ice, but we make do.
So I have a big checkbook again. I bought it again.
Good.
If I want to buy a Pitts Special or if I want to buy a Husky, what am I going to write that check for?
You're going to be somewhere around about $400K, depending on what you want.
For both planes?
Yeah, so they're going to be pretty close. Depending again what you want. We can get you into a Husky probably around about $280. But most of the time, once guys add the options and things that they want, they're going to be closer to that $330, $350 mark. So.
And people customize
absolutely.
their planes.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, we're looking at planes, and none of them, are the same in color. And I'm sure that people can bring their own thoughts to how it comes out your door.
And we paint all kinds of wild stuff.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that. An additional thing I think that sets us apart from the industry is, how custom the airplane can be. So if someone wants something in the airplane, maybe we've not done it before, we'll do it.
Before we start talking about the manufacturing process, which I think is fascinating, I want to talk about what is it like to run a business here in Afton. I think you told me, the second largest employer.
Yeah.
The hospital employs more folks.
Yep.
But you have to recruit many different trades.
We do.
Professional people with professional backgrounds here to Afton. Is that a challenge or does it work?
Sometimes it's a challenge, but we make it work. A lot of the folks here at the factory have either been here for a long time or they had, parents that worked here before them. So there's a long history of, aviation construction in the valley. So we draw from that, and things that we can't support in the valley, we'll bring people in for. And so it is difficult sometimes, but the people are everything here, and that's what really makes it work.
You're not close to any transportation ports either. So the logistics of all of this, does that add another layer of complexity?
It does.
Yeah.
The hardest thing for us right now is the fact that we have no rental car places really in town. And so what people have to do is if they want to come and pick their airplane up, they fly into Jackson Hole, then they rent a car, bring the car down, and then we'll have somebody return it for them. So that's kind of, just one of those things that where we are, gives us that little bit of a challenge.
Is this market like every other market? It ebbs and flows for both the Husky and the Pitts. Is it generally ticking up? Is it staying static?
So I think that right now we're witnessing, an upturn in the industry, and I think that's industry-wide. There's a big push right now for kind of these big tire bush planes that everyone's getting interested in. There's a lot of social media, content that people are watching and going, this is really a cool kind of flying that wasn't really so mainstream before. And the fact of where we are, in the Intermountain West, there's opportunities all around us for that kind of flying. And so I think people are becoming more and more interested in it.
There aren't just wheels that go on this plane. I think you're alluding to that you can put skis on this plane. You can put pontoons on this plane.
Exactly.
So these planes literally fly all over the world.
Yep, absolutely. And they're capable airplanes. Like you said, skis, floats, tires, they do it all.
Yeah. Let's talk about your history.
Okay.
When did you first fly a plane?
I was 16 years old. Yeah, 16 years old when I first started.
And what caused the interest?
I've always been interested in airplanes ever since I was a kid. I was a young kid in New Jersey, and we happened to be in the flight path for an airport. And my parents told me I'd be sitting on the back porch, pointing at airplanes. So I guess it's just something I've always been interested in.
And did you start your pilot's license route then?
I did. Yep. I started training when I was 16. Got busy with school. Finished my private pilot's license when I was 18. Fortunately, I had a fantastic instructor, Scott Weaver, great friend of mine, continues to be a great friend of mine, and he pushed me to get my instrument rating and my commercial and my flight instructor, and so he kind of drove me to do it all. So
Afton also to me is not a FAA center of operations.
No.
How does that impact your ability to do the work here? I mean, obviously there are tons of regulations that you follow to the T, and for certifications and permits and parameters and all that kind of stuff.
And there are. We deal with 3 different FAA entities: an aircraft certification office in Denver, an aircraft certification office in Los Angeles. That's bases a lot of flight testing and stuff are based out of there, and then a manufacturing inspection district office that's based out of Phoenix. So sometimes it can be difficult to get all of those guys kind of on the same page talking with each other, but they do a great job for the most part. And they come and visit us every quarter. We have an FAA inspector who will come on site. He audits all the processes and make sure everything's good to go. So the oversight is pretty rigorous, as you said.
We watched you this summer get into a pit special and take off for the first time. Brand new plane, off you went.
Right.
What's it like the very first flight that a plane makes? That's your job, right?
Right.
That someone needs to do that.
So what you didn't get to see is all the preparation that went into that flight before. So we don't ever just jump into something and go. We spend a great deal of time inspecting. I spend time with the guys as they're building the airplane with my eyes on it, so I know kind of exactly what's happening with the airplane. We run the airplane, carefully go through a checklist, and then we do the first flight. So the first flight, it used to bother me a little bit, thinking about the things that could happen or might happen or what could happen. But anymore, I think it's, I wouldn't say that it's routine because nothing's routine about it, but, those thoughts of what could happen, what might happen kind of get pushed aside, and you just go out and do your job.
You told me a statistic about test pilots, and it had to do with mortality rate of test pilots. Can you share that with our viewers?
It can be a very dangerous job. It can be a very dangerous job.
Yeah.
So we have those processes in place to, minimize and mitigate that risk to the lowest possible level.
Steve, earlier this summer, we watched you take off in that pit special and you were zigzagging down the runway.
Right.
Looked odd to me. Why were you doing that?
So where the pilot sits in the pits, which you can see, I think, from your film, is in the back seat. And so it makes it extremely difficult to see in front of you. In fact, it's impossible. So what we use is our peripheral vision, and sometimes you'll see airplanes kind of zigzagging in order to give the pilot kind of a visual ahead.
So you look out your side windows, and then you can see in front of you.
Right.
As you're going.
Right, exactly
Okay,
right.
that makes sense.
Yeah, so we call it S-turns.
Yeah.
So sometimes going down the runway at full power, we zigzag a little bit because we start to overcorrect. So there's a lot of torque in that little airplane. And so
Let's look into your crystal ball just a
Okay.
little bit. What's the vision for Aviat Air? 10 years from now, is it going to be kind of the same? Are you looking forward?
yeah, absolutely. So Aviat Aircraft, simply the best bush airplane in the world.
Period. That's the vision.
Yeah. And, I hope to continue to increase our production and continue to get our name out there and continue to build the company up and, continue to give back to the Valley and, continue to take care of the people here in the factory who depend on this place.
Steve, we've talked a little bit about the people that you have here
Right.
at Aviat Aircraft in Afton. Technical people, professionals, aircraft engineers. Give me an idea of what those folks do and how they do their work here.
Well, without the people, we couldn't do any of this. So, we have engineers, like you mentioned, aircraft mechanics, like Jim, and, fabricators, incredible welders, incredible paint folks, covering folks, the assembly folks. Without those people, none of this could be possible.
There has to be, people don't come here with many of the skills probably that they need to know. You probably invest quite a bit in your employees.
We do. Yeah, we do.
As far as training goes.
Yep. And we'll take people and, train them up to do a job. And a lot of times, as positions open around the factory, as people retire or leave, people will then assume those roles and new people will come in and be trained and, the cycle goes on.
When you talk about either your market for your planes or the people that want to work here, is this something that young people are for whatever reason more involved with and excited about today than they might have been a little while ago?
I think airplanes always make young people excited. I'd like to see more of that occurring. Obviously, it's a small town, but I hope to be able in the future to entice younger people to come in and get their hands dirty with us.
When you talk about general aviation across America, I think that's something that a lot of people really don't understand.
Right.
Everyone knows about commercial flying.
Sure.
But there are many, general aviation airports. What is the future for general aviation in your eyes?
Well, I think it looks bright. Last year was the first year really that the pilot population has increased due to the Aircraft Owner and Pilots Association, their involvement. I think they've played a really key role in trying to entice people to come and fly. And I think that without general aviation, this country would be a very, very different place than it is today. In China, for example, now they're starting to see and realize how important general aviation is, and they're now starting to embrace it. I think that it has a big commercial effect, for the economy, for travel, for everybody involved in it.
And I don't want to speak for you, but your advice to people that are interested, start.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you call your local airport?
And there's always a flight instructor who'll be sitting around just like I was 20 years ago, ready to go flying with you and show you what it's all about.
You were earlier this year at the Oshkosh Air Show.
Yep.
What do people tell you about Aviat Aircraft?
They love the airplanes. They love the quality of the airplane. A lot of times owners will come over and have a sandwich with us, and spend time just telling us about the things that they do in their airplanes, and how beautiful they are. And
Is it ever like you almost want to cover your ears sometimes when you hear some of those stories?
yeah, once in a while. Yeah, once in a while, depending on what they're
Sure.
telling me they're doing. So,
Back to the future a little bit. Do you see production increasing? I think you told me right now it's about 3 airplanes a month.
yeah, we're closer to 2 airplanes a month right now. Next year, I'd like to see us at 3 airplanes a month. And I think that the industry and the country can support that. So,
We've shot a lot of what we call B-roll in advance of you and I talking today, but let's kind of walk us through the production process.
okay.
The first thing is that the chassis has to be built. That's
Right.
welders and a lot of very technical folks that are putting that together.
Right. So really, the whole process starts over in our receiving department. So every raw material, everything that comes in, has to be checked to a blueprint or checked as far as the certifications of that stuff, that it meets our process specs. So everything in the airplane is made in the USA. So the process really starts there when Shelley, our fantastic receiving inspector, verifies the quality of the parts that come in. And then those tubes will be cut on our CNC plasma cutter, brought over to the weld shop, which we've seen. It'll be put into the jig, and the guys will weld it. And that really is, kind of the beginning of the airframe. Now, behind the scenes, our fabrication shop is building all the parts and things that will attach to the fuselage.
Quality control every step.
Every step of the way. Yep, every step of the way. There's an entire list for each particular component of the airplane that will go with the airplane until it's completed, and then it goes into a file that we keep forever. So I have files from some of the very first pits in 1970 that if someone calls and says, hey, how about this? We can open that file and go, wow, it's like a look back into history and see exactly how that airplane was made, who built what, and who, signed it off.
To the person.
Yeah.
To the person. You look at these planes; they're so beautifully painted, and it looks like they're, nice tin or metal shells, but that's not the case.
No. Inside of that is a very robust steel structure that starts in the weld shop.
Right.
And then over top is aluminum panels and also Seconite fabric. So it's a lightweight airplane, but very strong.
Talk to us about that fabric, because that's what's amazing. You touch the side of the airplane and it's not metal.
Right. So it's a polyester fiber. It's woven Dacron. It's extremely durable. It's very UV resistant, and once it's painted, it's beautiful.
How long has that fabric been used?
So in the beginning, cotton fabric was used on the airplanes. So cotton, there's some undesirable
Moisture
characteristics.
seems to me as one of them.
Yeah, moisture is one. Cotton is also not very good in sun. So if the airplane sees a lot of sunlight not being hangared, there's a big degradation in that fabric. So that's why Seconite and the Dacron polyester fiber stuff has been so important. And that started to be used probably in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay. So then that is literally stretched over the aircraft.
That's right.
And
So
then is there some heat then also?
there is. So we use irons that are calibrated, and we use those irons to shrink the fabric tight. So when they put it over and glue it, they get it, semi-tight, and then they'll go back over it with the irons, and that's what gives it that real top finish.
What's next in the process?
So after the airplane is covered, the fuselage has obviously been welded, it's been painted and corrosion proofed. Then they cover it. Then it'll go to paint. So
Where are the wings attached?
So the wings are actually attached in Husky final.
Okay.
So final assembly. We do things a little differently. A lot of aircraft manufacturers put the entire airplane together and then paint it. We actually paint it and then put the airplane together. So we do things a little bit differently, and that's part of and due to the process how we build the airplane.
Then it goes to final. Then that's where all the checks happen, and then that first flight is prepared.
That's right. So the airplane will all be assembled. There's 3 different stations in Husky Final, so they'll come down just as a raw fuselage, painted, where they'll fit all the panels to the airplane and begin the assembly process. It'll move to Station 2, where the engines are hung and most of the wiring is completed. The landing gear is installed. From there, move to
Obviously,
what we
you're
call...
purchasing engines.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, we purchase engines from Wyoming. And then from there, it'll move to Station 3, where the wings are hung and all the finishing work is done to the airplane. Then it goes over the line to flight test.
Start to finish. Today, we're starting Steve's plane
Right.
to when Aviat Aircraft delivers Steve's plane.
So depending on what I might want in my airplane will change the length of time that it takes to build the airplane. But probably around, I would say, close to 5 months.
And if I were to order one today, there's a little bit of a wait list because you have a series of planes in production.
We do. Yep, we're always continuously in production. So the next airplane I could get you probably wouldn't be until next year.
So I assume back to the kind of the marketing thing a little bit, but the internet is your friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Social media is your friend. You've been able to kind of get the word out about.
Right. So we adopted social media stuff probably a little later than we should have, but we're making that presence out there now. Obviously, a lot of people are finding us via the internet. So very important.
Well, Steve, it's a pleasure for us to be here. It's surprising that all of this happens in Afton.
Yeah.
It really is important to the community, important to Wyoming. And thank you so much, and best wishes for your future.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you guys coming.
Funding for this program was provided by the members of the Wyoming PBS Foundation. Thank you for your support.